I'm going to start Thursday off with migrations, also because I want to take some time and clarify the example a little more. But I think I'll just sort of briefly show that the app that we've built, I've only run about 3 real commands here, right? I did it over a couple steps to show how to approach the Rails command line, but it's worth just taking a minute and thinking about what's happened. We generated a new app. Rails put all the pieces in the right place. We asked Rails to scaffold a model with some parameters, and I'll set things up such that we can look at exactly, and in more detail, what these bits were. And when we did that, we got a whole ton of code for us. So if you're, want to try these things out, you can run the same command line. If you open either sort of on your own computer or somewhere in Codio, that's sort of like a Scratch workspace if you want to use Codio. But if you just install Rails locally, it should be fine. So briefly, I kind of just want to show you, everything that's here. So we have a movies controller. And one of the things that is worth thinking about with Rails is that the goal as you're learning how to work with Rails, how to work on SaaS applications is not to try and understand every single line of code at a complete micro and detail level. As Berkeley students, I think you're all sort of used to let me learn everything, to the most detail possible. And what I think is more important here is the structure that we have in this application. That when we make a new Rails app, that each of these methods that are defined are following a similar structure. You could, if you're playing around with this, easily just try and scaffold something like a user model where you have a username, an email address, and so on. But each of these things, we have an index, show, new, edit, create. We will come back to this, but notably here, right, where earlier we said that in active record, calling new and calling save are 2 different steps. Rails does this for us. So we have movie.new with some parameters. We have movie.save, which actually saves the data to the database. And Rails provides, by default, some recommended error handling. In your own app, you might do this with something else. And we have similar actions for updating and deleting. Notably here, the Rails controller action for deleting data is named destroy. I promise you at some point you'll create a controller and call this thing delete and spend a few minutes wondering why the action name is not delete but destroy. That's just the way it is. You scaffold code, you don't need to worry about it. And there's a couple additional helpful things that Rails provides for us, which we'll come back to later, that deal with sort of protections against malicious data. So you don't need to worry for the time being about every single line of code that Rails will generate for you. But you've got a pretty sizable controller. Again, what is perhaps the weirdest thing? Not our helpers. Our helpers are not that weird. What is perhaps the weirdest thing to get used to about Rails when you start working with it is the fact that this is a complete model for an entire object backed by the database. Basically 0 lines of code. It is one of those things where when you're learning Rails, and this is definitely one of the bits can be tricky, but the code is not everything that's going on. And because the Ruby philosophy is code is meant to be read and not meant to be written, code that is just generic, is sort of hidden away, think about what should be happening here. What are the things that this application record is providing for us? Application record is just what we said is an active record base class. All that stuff is given for us automatically by the active record base class or by the classes that are built into the Rails framework. And so one of the things that can be a little bit hard is when I look at a file, whoops, I did not leave it open. When I look at a file like movie, it's not exactly obvious, but there are dozens of methods that exist here. Most importantly are the things that we want to do. There's create, there's save, there's the new method. There's a method to, of course, for each movie instance, get our title, our rating, and so on. And all those things are provided automatically. And finally, what Rails generates for us. This is the kind of stuff that probably varies the most between different kinds of applications. But in our view files, these are what take our data that lives in the form of Ruby objects and turns them into HTML. So in this class, we'll typically be using html.erb or html.erb templates, a way of writing HTML, which embeds Ruby code in our HTML file. So we're going to get to the details in the next couple lectures. You'll have seen some of it with Sinatra, but remember, wherever we put angle brackets and percentage signs, we are embedding a bit of Ruby code that whatever that returns gets put inside our HTML file. So this is a Rails method, which will help us generate an HTML form. We have titles and headings. And Rails, things that you shouldn't bother with memorizing, but if you're exploring the code, will do really helpful things for you, like provide you a method called pluralize, which knows how to turn one movie into two movies, and so on. And this is one of those features that as you learn to use Rails, you hopefully sort of just pick up, become comfortable with, but don't focus on memorizing sort of every single line of code here. So that's a quick tour through Rails. Finally, the last thing, if you are playing with this at home, unfortunately our chips do not use Rails 7 yet, but if anyone is in the business of wanting to sort of learn, try things out, modern Rails versions keep getting better. There are 2 commands that I'll make available with the notes that just optionally you can run. They automatically set up things like Bootstrap. So as this sort of scaffolds a whole bunch of stuff, I run 2 commands. Rails installs Bootstrap for me. I load this. It's still like not the world's nicest looking app, but it looks a lot better than it did a minute ago. And so I think that's the philosophy to sort of just keep in mind, is that reuse tools. Tools help you get work done without having to understand them. So yeah, we built a whole working web app in a few minutes today with a lot of time in between.